Ladies and gentlemen, although I can't imagine there's a lot of ladies watching this, welcome to the Q&A. We're just going to get right into it. A few of you, I think 4 out of my 22 followers have submitted their queries. My dad always calls me a query, but I'm going to answer some of your esoteric questions, whether or not I know the answers. I'll give my opinion, maybe make some things up. We'll see where this goes. So our first question, did Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike predict World War I and World War II? For those of you that are unfamiliar, Albert Pike was the Manly P. Hall called him the Pope of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. He revised the first 32 degrees, the initiation rituals of the first 32 degrees, the symbolism, the meaning, the allegory behind the first 32 degrees. He wrote the book he's referring to in this question, Morals and Dogma, is basically Pike's magnum opus on the 32 degrees, on each of the 32 degrees of Scottish Rite Masonry, the 33rd degree obviously being an honorary degree, an invite-only degree, but not something one can attain through scholarship, Masonic scholarship, essentially. And so to answer your question, did Morals and Dogma predict these world wars? No, that's not included anywhere in the book. This is a common misconception by the conspiracy community. However, there were letters documented from Pike to someone else. I'm not sure who it was, so that can speak to my level of knowledge, but I believe it predicted all 3 world wars. Pike said there will be 3 world wars. The first and the second were dead on accurate, and the third predicted a war in the Middle East, I believe specifically between Muslims and Zionists, that would lead to the creation, the warranting of a one world government. There would be so much bloodshed that the masses would say, hey, please, whatever we can do to stop this fighting, please do it. And the globalist organizations, the United Nations, the Trilateral Commission, the WEF, the Bilderberg Group, all of these politics, all of these deciders upon global affairs would come together and say, sure, we can stop the fighting, and the only way to do it is through a one world government. The people of Earth must come together, and this would place within them absolute control, absolute power, and this is what they're working for. This is what Pike admitted to them working for. Now, whether or not those letters that we see, I believe it's just one letter where he calls for 3 world wars, are accurate, are real. I mean, I didn't see him write them. I wasn't there. If any of you are remote viewing, if any of you are, have the capacities of something like a 3-eyed raven, then please, by all means, go and figure out the validity of this letter. But that's the letter he was referring to. So yes, he did predict World War I, World War II, and World War III. Quite the visionary. I mean, this guy was a genius. He spoke over 10 languages. He was a poet. He was one of these esoteric mystic geniuses. I believe he served in some war, not the Revolutionary War, but he did serve in a war. I'm not positive what. Now I'm just yapping about Pike, but yeah, it's alchemical allegory to a degree as well. Order out of chaos, which is what the phoenix represents, rising out of the ashes. So they want to burn the old world to bring in the new world order. Novus ordo seclorum, annuit coptis. These are Roman sayings. Let's get into the next question here. Can you dive into ancient knowledge or architecture with pyramids everywhere in the world and the Grand Canyon and Utah having interesting rock formations? Yeah, I agree. The Grand Canyon in Utah do have some pretty cool rock formations. As to the first part of your question, ancient knowledge or architecture with pyramids everywhere, this is Atlantis. Or whether or not you want to call it Atlantis, this is ancient civilizations. This is pre-Diluvian civilization prior to the flood that's referenced in the Bible, the flood that's referenced in nearly every other mythology across the earth, which may or may not have represented the sinking of Atlantis, which was said to be a society, it was first mentioned by Plato, but if you look into all of these other ancient mystery schools, the mystery traditions of Eleusis, of the Druids, of the Ophites, all these people refer to a pre-Diluvian era of civilization, not of the mainstream evolutionary stages of Earth, but rather a more spiritual stages of evolution and theosophy, all of these things, right? They do talk about Atlantis. They do talk about Atlantis having had existed and being an advanced society, a society with technology far beyond our means, technology that could have created the pyramids through vibration, resonance, harmony, these kinds of instruments that they used to power they say they had basically floating cars, essentially. This is what they say. Again, I was not there, but this would speak to the pyramids that we cannot construct today, or at least they say would take hundreds or thousands of years to create. And these being present all across the earth stem from the Atlantean civilization and their means for harvesting energy, a free energy grid. They harnessed what was known as a vertical energy grid. If you want to learn more about this, or at least the speculation about this, there's a book titled, I believe it's Atlantis to Tesla, the Kolbrin Connection, something along those lines. And it speaks to Nikola Tesla's ideology of Earth, his ventures for free global energy taken from the ether, harnessing the power of the ether, which essentially the Atlanteans did, and how these two methods correlated between each other, and how Tesla was actually inspired by Atlantis. So that's a good read. I read it a long time ago, so I can't recall the specifics of it right off the dome, but I'm working towards that. That's the goal, to be that good. But we're just getting started. This is still, we're in Genesis of the impact I'm going to make esoterically. So let's get on to the next question to sum up my answer to the last one. Yeah, Atlantis, or pre-Diluvian civilization. They do say that after the fall of Atlantis, that it fell due to black magic, corruption of morality. Essentially, it was God punishing the earth. Or back then they said gods because they were polytheists. The Mayans, if you look at, I have a video on my TikTok about the Mayan, and I believe it was the Mayan and Phoenician alphabets and their direct correlations, their direct similarities, which could have only been possible with a previous civilization having created these languages in a more middle part of the earth that they all migrated to post-flood. And that is what these civilizations, the Mayans, say that their people came from a civilization to the east who came on boats from the sea. So take that as you will. To answer your question, completely summed up, I do believe the pyramids were the remnants, or at least the early creations of Atlantean settlers, or pre-Diluvian settlers. You don't have to call them Atlanteans. You can call them whatever you want. You can call them the N-word. I really don't care. But they do say there was a pre-Diluvian civilization. Again, I can't speak to this completely. If you want to learn more about the potentiality, proofs for Atlantis having had existed, the book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly is a phenomenal read. That's the best case. That's the best ever case made for Atlantis existing I've ever read. So give that a look. There's an audiobook version on YouTube. It's hard to follow. I have the real copy. Again, I'm going to be making a community where all of these books, all of these resources will be available. That is currently in the making. If I ever finish it, we'll see what happens though. Next question, is there an agency that works for celebrities and fakes their deaths or sets them up with new lives when they want to get out? Yeah, so essentially you call a store, you say it's a vacuum repair store and you need a new vacuum. And the guy there, he'll set you up. He might bring you to Alaska, somewhere in the wilderness. I'm kidding, obviously. No, I've got no idea, guys. I appreciate that you would suspect I would have knowledge on this. Maybe some people do. I haven't looked into that. I'm not that brilliant, and I'm not one of these individuals, so I have no connection to this, no knowledge of it whatsoever. Or do I? Who knows? But no, I really don't know. I'm sure you're referencing potential Michael Jackson, Tupac, Are these people alive? Are these people doing their things? I mean, I could talk about the Vatican rat lines and how they help Nazi criminals escape, but that's not really what you're looking for. I guess Hitler was a celebrity to a degree. Shout out to him, but no, I'm not sure. Next question. Explain the relation/differences between the Jesuit Order, Freemasonry, Skull and Bones, Knights of Templar. I'll add in other secret societies, Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn, the Rosicrucian Society. Obviously, I think you're just referring to all of these secret societies. How do they interact? Which one was the first one? Who's in power? Are they opposing each other? Do they work together? But yeah, let's get into it. Great question. I was once very confused by this myself. I researched the Society of the Rose Cross, the Rosicrucian Society, very deeply. From what I've seen with Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry specifically, these are controlled opposition, weaponized societies aimed at combating the Protestant Reformation by the Jesuit order. So there are direct links to the Jesuit Society, the Society of Jesus that you just mentioned, having control over Freemasonry as well as the Rosicrucians. The Knights Templar existed far before the Jesuits. I believe they fell in 1113. Don't quote me on that. It might be 1116 actually. 1116. I know it was Friday the 13th, October 13th. It might have been. That might be wrong. But it was Friday the 13th. The Knights Templar fell, destroyed, ran out by the papacy, ran out by I believe it was King David at the time, who owed the Templars a massive debt. The Templars were the papacy's bankers. They were the first bankers in the world, essentially. The story tells it that these Templars went underground and eventually sprung up to create Scottish Rite Masonry. This is an idea that was embedded into Freemasonry, and most Masons accept as being their background, and some scholars, some occult scholars that I've even seen, some conspiracy researchers, take this as fact just because some people have said it. For my research, I do not believe that this is the case. They may have played a small role in it, but Freemasonry, and specifically Scottish Rite Masonry, which a lot of people contribute to the Knights Templar, was created by the Jesuit order. Now, I have seen things that link the fall of the Templars to the creation of the Society of Jesus in Spain directly, and the Templar gold, the Templar wealth being transferred into Vatican assets after their fall and eventually turning into the Society of Jesus has some merit. I haven't researched this in depth to make an exact claim, but this was essentially, the Templars, they got into this Sufi mysticism. There were things about them worshiping Baphomet, the head of a goat. I'm not too into that. What the papacy says, what the crown says after the fall of this society obviously is going to be rewritten, is going to be tampered with. What do they say? They said the victors write history, right? So I'm not too into that. I do believe that they got away from Christianity to a degree and dabbled in Gnosticism, Sufi mysticism. So these were ancient Persian teachings, more about the mind and going inward, the temple being within rather than faith in Christ specifically. But as for the Jesuit order, Freemasonry, Skull and Bones was created by the Russell Trust. They are another society that is far under the Jesuit order, far under the power of the Vatican, and is basically just a recruiting apparatus within Yale. So do they all interact? Sure. Do they all feud sometimes? Sure. But at the end of the day, the Jesuit order is the highest authority. There are various quotes from Masons themselves. I'll try and find some of them and pop them up on the screen here, that from, again, I say Masons themselves, from respected occultists, respected esoteric scholars that reiterate the idea that the Jesuit order or the Jesuit general is the most superior authority in Freemasonry. And I actually have a long form video coming up about that, about how the Jesuit order, about how the Vatican, the Knights of Malta, created Freemasonry, control Freemasonry, and have used Freemasonry as a front society for their operations, specifically during the American Revolution. 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. Obviously, the Catholic Church condemned Freemasonry, said anyone who joins a Masonic lodge will be subject to immediate excommunication from the church. But we do know, if you're deep into this conspiracy discourse, you know that what the Catholic Church says publicly and what they do privately are two very different things, kind of like my father's sexuality. But I won't go any further on that. And so yes, the Jesuit order, the Catholic Church, the Vatican controls Freemasonry, various Masonic lodges. There were even Masonic lodges created by Knights of Malta in Malta after the condemning of Freemasonry by the Catholic Church. So that's absolutely contradictory. That's just one example. Various Masonic lodges were erected in Benedictine Catholic monasteries. That's more contradiction to the Catholic condemning or condemnation, I don't know, condemnation, that's what I put on my hot dog, I'm pretty sure. I guess that has two meanings too, in a way. But yeah, Freemasonry controlled by the Catholic Church. Everything at this point is controlled by the Vatican, by Rome. Just view the Vatican as the Roman Empire, the Roman bloodlines, the Babylonian bloodlines, the Canaanites, who are the Jews, who are the Khazarians. So yes, let's get into the next one. Do militias like the Azov Battalion do black magic rituals in war? I gotta be honest, I'm not familiar with the Azov Battalion. I think that's is that Bulgarian? I've got no idea. But yes, various militaries do black magic rituals. I mean, if we look at Game of Thrones, this is my second Game of Thrones reference, probably because I'm doing a rewatch right now. Yeah, if you look at the Lord of Light, you look at Stannis Baratheon and his army, they were sacrificing, they were making sacrifices left and right to win favor with the gods, or the one god, the Lord of Light, which parallels Lucifer, the Lord of Light, the light bringer, Apollo, the light bringer, or Apollo, the light bearer, which is the Statue of Liberty. Which is what the Apollo NASA missions were named after. Yes, they do make sacrifices to gain favor in war. However, war itself is mass ritual sacrifice, which is why a lot of these wars, you look at wars in the Middle East, you look at World War I, World War II, these wars are being funded by both sides, being funded by the Swiss banks, because they are themselves mass human sacrifice to Moloch, to Baal, and yes, so to answer your question, yes, they do. The next question was, this guy just said Kirk, rawness, no censorship. I mean, I'll try my best. This is gonna have to take a moment for this one. So a lot of people are saying that we should never celebrate death. Death should not be celebrated, especially in the instance of Charlie Kirk. However, I say, yeah, I absolutely would celebrate death. I mean, shit, I watch the TV, you see Joffrey die, season 4, episode 2 or 3, and I'm fucking jumping around the room singing hallelujah. Like, I will celebrate death, absolutely. If it is the death of individuals who are oppressing the working class, who are taking away the rights of the working class, who are committing crimes against humanity on the daily, who are fucking little children on an island that I won't name, who are making sacrifices to Moloch, who are responsible for the child trafficking epidemic in this world, I will absolutely celebrate and rejoice in the death of these individuals. However, it should go without saying that is not who Charlie Kirk was, and that is not what his rhetoric was aligned with. He was a political speaker. He had discourse with people who disagreed with him. Anybody who's celebrating his death is suffering from severe mental illness, or at least depression to a degree. I'm not one of these guys, Andrew Tate, who says depression is fake. Depression is very real, and it's damage to the psyche. It's a large, vast shadow within the unconscious. And so, on Charlie Kirk, from a conspiracy-related perspective, I did hold the opinion prior to his passing, who knows, right? No disrespect, right? I did hold the opinion that he was controlled opposition. I thought anyone with that big of a movement taking that staunch of a side within the political landscape had to be controlled. Anyone who causes division amongst the populace as opposed to unity, whatever. I don't know if that's the correct verbiage I used there. Anyone who's causing division, Nick Fuentes, Andrew Tate, Alex Jones, Candace Owens, anybody on the left, their parallels on the Democratic side. I hold no opinion in politics. I think it's theater. It's like watching Hamilton, which I despise. So yeah, I did believe Kirk was controlled to a certain extent, to a degree. People are saying, oh, he started to question Israel following up to his death and the weeks following up to his death. And it's like, all right, I mean, sure. How many people have questioned Israel, right? Everyone and their mother in this day and age is questioning Israel, even people with large platforms. And so his death, a sad thing, obviously a professional hit. The kid that they're saying did it, I do not buy for a second. So you could take it as you will. At the end of the day, whether or not this was real, whether or not this was fake, the purpose was to cause further division amongst the populace. It is the top versus the bottom. I see comments. I try to stay away from it, and I'll get into that reason as well. But I try to stay away from these comments regarding his death because it is sickening, some of them, to read from both perspectives. There's people on the right saying, we got to kill all Democrats because this happened. And if you have that perspective, you're a moron. And there's people on the left saying, oh, thank God. And this has only widened the divide between Democrats and Republicans. And if you're allowing this to penetrate your ideologies and your beliefs in regards to politics, then you need to strengthen your mental fortitude. I had to take a quick pause for a little bathroom break. Yes, I'm not sure exactly where I was at on the Charlie Kirk rant. But I know I didn't get to the point to talking about how this was, whether or not you believe this was staged, whether or not you believe this was carried out by a lunatic left-wing Democrat, whether or not he was, whether or not he was shot by my uncle, whether or not he was shot by a CIA asset, Mossad, whoever, right? At the end of the day, this was a target on the collective unconscious, on the mental plane. This was blasted all over the news, on every news platform, every social media outlet. It was meant to stir up controversy, and it was meant to penetrate your mind and your psyche and your unconscious. It was meant to make you angry. It was meant to make you upset. It was meant to make you confused. And it was meant to implement negative emotion, because at the end of the day, I have more in-depth videos talking about this, and I'll have even more in-depth videos talking about this. The external reality is a reflection of the collective unconscious, of the mind of God, of your own unconscious mind that is creating what you see in your perception. And so when you see Charlie Kirk die and you spend the whole day angry, in rage, in sadness, and whatever emotion, most likely negative, in fear, that externalizes itself. That crystallizes within your reality. Not they say thoughts create your reality. They say all is the mind, and this isn't just pointing to the fact that what you think will thus become what you do. It's literally what you think becomes the world around you, and this becomes more apparent when you take various narcotics per se, or meditate deeply. And so this is what the death of Charlie Kirk was meant to do, alongside stirring up chaos, stirring up division within the populace. But that division is amplified because that division is the product of the attack on the mental plane. Everything that happens in this physical world happens in the invisible world first, happens with thought forms and emotions. Kind of going back to the first question I was asked, Albert Pike and the 3 World Wars, this is that chaos, and this is that order out of chaos. Not only will there be world war, they want civil war. And out of that civil war, how do we stop the fighting? One world government. One world government for you. One world government for you, one world government for me, right? And so that's my opinion on the Charlie Kirk situation. Let's go to the next query. What the hell is going on in Antarctica? Why can't nobody go there? Great question. I struggled with this for a long time, years ago, and it led me to some extreme conclusions, to be honest. Things that I'm not sure I should be putting out there this early. Things that I'm sure some of you are already believing in. Things that most of you will hopefully come to believing in. But the short story, the clearer version will be, why can't you go to Antarctica? Why have all the nations in the world somehow agreed on this one thing is because, and most of the Antarctica discourse comes from the General Byrd expedition, who was actually a Rothschild asset financed by the Rothschilds. It might have been the Rockefellers, so don't quote me on that, but it was one of the two, where he said he found more land either past Antarctica or within Antarctica that was full of greenery, forest, waterfalls, not a barren, icy desert that they claim it to be, right? But whether or not this is real, whether or not this is accurate, I believe it was Byrd that also reported seeing an ice wall stretching for miles upon miles that lasted them days to sail along. But in my opinion, whether or not this ice wall is real. Palestine, shout out to them, free the boys over there. It's not because there's some secret technology there. It's not because there's some alien base there. It's not because there's pyramids there. It is because the map of Earth that we have been given is a lie. It is a fabrication. Within Antarctica, if you view it from a geocentric perspective, which coincides with the idea that all is the mind, which coincides with all of these things that these ruling class elites, these Masonic Jesuit elites believe in, that they practice and that they utilize to keep the populace in their grip, in their control, aligns with the geocentric model and the geocentric perspective of the universe, so to speak. And so Antarctica, whether or not there's further land beyond Antarctica, I can't speak on. Haven't been there. I hope to one day. But why you can't go there is because it would reveal a truth about the world that the world is not ready to hear. And it would reveal essentially the biggest lie on Earth. And that is that we live on a spinning ball flying through space. I'm not saying the Earth is flat. I'm not crazy. I'm not a lunatic. However, it is a projection of consciousness. Take that however you want. None of these ancient geniuses believed. Nikola Tesla didn't believe that we revolved around the sun. Einstein even stated that the Earth is a motionless, rotationless plane. None of the greatest geniuses over time believed in these ideas. That, along with evolution, is a lie. New Age science is a lie, most of it. Obviously, some of it is irrefutable. NASA is full of... I have a NASA video that got taken down from TikTok. Take that as you will. Could be because I said a couple racial slurs. Could be because it's too true to be on the platform. Who knows? But it's on Rumble if you want to watch that, and it talks about essentially the in-depth, massive occult symbolism behind NASA. And NASA is one of, if not the most corrupt institutions in the world. First we had NASA, then now, which means in Hebrew to deceive. Now we have SpaceX, headed by Mr. Elon Musk, the technocrat billionaire who is positioned as a controlled opposition, anti-establishment, right-wing hero, free speech advocate. Although if you're anybody of intelligence, then you're aware that Elon Musk is just like the rest of them, only more public. He is a Saturnian worshipper. There was the Osiris missions in NASA, homage to Osiris, god of the underworld in ancient Egypt, the mysteries of Osiris, the trinity of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, which evolved out of Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz in Babylon. I referenced the Apollo missions being paralleled to Apollo or Lucifer, the light bringer. Here's an image of the Luciferian sigil compared with the heliocentric model. Now I'm not, take this as you will. I know this is all, I'm just deep in it. I'm schizophrenic. I belong in a mental institution, perhaps. Who knows? Don't take my word for it. But Antarctica, why can't you go there? Because if you were to go there, you would realize that it is not a continent, but it is rather just the outward adverse of the North Pole. It is continuously south. Next question. I know there are a lot of evil forms of magic, but are there any forms of magic that are aligned with good/God? Absolutely yes. So there's three types of magic: black magic, white magic, and gray magic. Gray magic is the middle area, and white magic would be benevolent magic, typically of a healing fashion. So Paracelsus, who would use astrologically timed rituals to conduct healing. He was the greatest physician of all time, a mystic, hermetic alchemist who used herbal medicine, herbal magical treatments to cure his patients. So yes, white magic is real. If you want a book for that, sorry, I kind of stopped referencing books. I don't know why. If you want a book for that, Magic, A Treatise on Esoteric Ethics by Manly P. Hall. So yes, there you have that. Next question, what do you think about Hitler? Love him. Kidding, sorry. What do you think about Hitler and his links to the Thule Society? I haven't researched the Thule Society as well as Hitler too much, so I can't really comment on that. In regards to what do I think about Hitler, you know, it has become common consensus amongst internet people on the internet, the populace, we'll just say that, to say, oh, Hitler was right. If only we had let Hitler finish his job. If Hitler had finished his job, we'd be living in a one-world government currently. Hitler was, they think just because Hitler was against the Jews, that he was some sort of hero, and this could not be further from the truth, and this comes from the anti-Semitic, not that these people are inherently anti-Semitic, but the anti-Semitic ideology that is being pushed by anti-establishment individuals like Andrew Tate, Nick Fuentes, who, in my opinion, most likely controlled opposition, however, maybe not. Jewish hate is growing amongst the populace, and for, you know, not good reason, but I can see where they're coming from. Obviously, Israel is a problem. Obviously, Israel has its claws in America to a certain extent, not as large as everyone thinks, but it is absolutely prevalent, and it is absolutely dangerous, and Israel is a world power who is very malevolent currently, and so Hitler is responsible for the creation of Israel. And that is my perspective on him. The Jesuit Society wrote his book, Mein Kampf. I don't know if that's how you say that. That was my best attempt. They funded Hitler. They created the United Nations to thus vote for the creation of the Jewish state of Israel. Why was Israel needing to be created? Because Hitler, whose mission in Germany was to get the Jews over to Palestine so that they could then create Israel and take back Jerusalem, as well as that so Hitler could destroy the Protestant Reformation in Germany. This video has not allowed me to get much into the battle between Protestants and Roman Catholics, specifically carried out by the Jesuit order, which to me is less of a theological battle than a political battle. But yeah, Hitler, in my opinion on Hitler, not a good guy. Controlled opposition to a degree, not like the people of today, but he was a Vatican asset, and that can be documented. There are much more fringe theories that I have made videos about, that Hitler was a descendant of the Rothschild bloodline, a product of a satanic ritual performed on Maria Schicklgruber, Hitler's grandmother, at the Rothschild mansion in Vienna, I believe. On the night of August 31st, I think, between 1 and 3 a.m., 3 Rothschild men, she was a maid there, 3 Rothschild men snuck into her room, had their way with her, if you will, not in any just normal capacity of rape either, but with satanic chanting, wearing devil costumes, darkness, just doing anything to make this as scary as possible, to spike the adrenaline, spike the fear, adrenochrome, and to impregnate her that way as a method of creating a ritual mind-controlled slave, which some believe Hitler to be. There's a book, Hitler Was a British Agent, is a good read that speaks on this. Another book, The Falsification of History by John Hammer, touches on this. It's a very, very minute part of that book. That's a massive book. Great read. He gets some things wrong that I disagree with, but overall he's got the absolutely, he's on the mark. Next question. What's the best way to introduce someone to this kind of information? Find something they're interested in. Most people are interested in some sort of conspiracy theory, whether that's 9/11, whether that's Israel, whether that's Donald Trump, whether that's, the moon landing, anything. And then research that to an unparalleled degree. Eventually it will lead back to the Society of Jesus, to the Jesuit order most likely, or to the Federal Reserve, to the Swiss banks, which go back to the Vatican. You have to be thorough. You have to know your stuff. A lot of people like to talk on this information with no real knowledge of it. People who say, oh, the Jews run the world. The Jews run the world. And then you say, oh, which ones? And then they go, oh, well, the Rothschilds and and then you look like a moron because you don't really know what you're talking about. You haven't researched this, you haven't studied this, you haven't read books. You're just taking other people's words from podcasts or YouTube videos and regurgitating them as your own. You can't force people to learn this stuff, but you can, over time, drop nuggets here and there and influence them to eventually, potentially, changing their worldview. Next question. What are planets really? Specifically focusing on Saturn. Obviously, I assume you're referring to Saturnian worship. So Saturn worship has nothing to do with the planet Saturn and everything to do with the Saturnian deity, or Kronos in Greek mythology, Saturn or Kronos, who also is Baal, who is Moloch, and who is the demiurge. People have commented saying, oh no, these are different deities. Yeah, they're different deities mythologically, but in the mental plane, Saturn is the governor of the material world. He is the governor of time, he is the governor of reality, he is the governor of karma. In the 7 descending luminaries that you descend from when you enter this realm, Saturn is the lowest, and that is because Saturn is also the black sun. What is also the black sun? Demiurgos. And so when these elites make sacrifices, whether it was the Canaanites sacrificing to Baal or using Moloch, these were sacrifices to the same Saturnian deity. And so what are planets? They are luminaries. They are vessels of divine knowledge, divine power, divine energy. Nikola Tesla believed these wandering stars. He believed in the firmament. He believed that these wandering stars were actually entities themselves. Rudolf Steiner refers to them as entities themselves. None of these esoteric mystics, none of the smartest men in history, none of the ruling class believe that they are actual rocks or balls of gas out in the universe. All of them refer to these as luminaries and stages in your karmic cycles, right? As you descend through them, you descend downwards when you enter this world. The next thing someone responded with was the Titanic. The Titanic, most people are aware at this point, was a combined effort to reap rewards for insurance through the White Star Line, owned by JP Morgan, I believe, at the time, as well as to deal with the individuals who opposed the Federal Reserve. So John Jacob Astor and 2 others that I'm not familiar with. If you want more on that, you could read books about Jekyll Island. I believe Eustace Mullins, who I don't trust, who a lot of people have attributed to being a misinformation artist, wrote The Creature on Jekyll Island. But there's other books on Jekyll Island and the meetings that took place to create the Federal Reserve. But yes, that was what the Titanic was. Next question here. Astral travel, real or just mental subjective projection? I have a very interesting perspective on this topic. I've never astral projected myself. I've lucid dreamed many times. I have a friend who has astral projected or claims to have astral projected. I believe him, but I wasn't there again. But my take on this, my belief on this is, as I say, there is a collective unconscious. There is a invisible world, also referred to as the mental plane or the etheric realm. And so when you're partaking in astral projection, you're not leaving your body from an outward perspective, so to speak. You're going inward, however, still operating within the mind, within the unconscious, but within the mental plane. So sometimes when people astral project, you might see things that are not necessarily 100% aligned with what is happening in material reality. However, that doesn't make it any less real. That doesn't mean it's just some dream or something. This is the case because everything happens in the invisible world first. So you might be seeing things that are about to happen, or things that are happening in the mental plane that will manifest themselves in a different way, materially. I don't know what you necessarily meant by mental subjective projection, although I think this is kind of maybe what you meant. So not operating as some invisible force in the material realm, which is kind of a misconception. Like if I were to astral travel, I could, like I'm a ghost essentially. It's not that. You're operating within the world behind our world, or next to it, but that we don't have access to easily. Next question here. Does China have occult origins? I don't know. I'll ask them. Yeah, I don't know much. Obviously, there's Tibetan, very deep occult traditions, occult origins within Tibet, within the East. A lot of this comes out of the East, this Taoist doctrine. However, does China have occult origins? I don't know if you mean modern day communistic China or what you're referring to. Either way, I can't really comment on it. I don't know much about the history of China, if I'm being honest with you. I don't know, does the yin and yang, is that China or is that Japanese? Because that's very occult. That's alchemical duality, and that also represents the sun and the moon, which are rotating within the heavens, within the firmament. That is what the yin and yang are. But I don't know if that's Chinese. That might be wrong on my part. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a direct answer for you. Maybe the things that I don't necessarily know directly, I'll make other videos about. I'll research further. So that about does it. Thank you for listening to this horrific presentation of a video. Hopefully it comes out better when I edit it than it does right now in my head. I look forward to the journey we are about to embark on because, yeah, this is going to be fun. I appreciate all the questions, all the comments, all the support, and all the people who are interested in the same things as me that give me a resource to vent to talk to share these ideas with and bounce things off of. So that's awesome. I won't tell you to subscribe, but you do it if you want. I can't make you. I can't stop you. You're the master of your own destiny. But if you want to, yeah. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one. I am starting a new show, a solo podcast type of thing, kind of like this, but far more off the top, less topical. Kind of like just a solo podcast. Going to be called "Are You Awake?" Maybe talk more about current events and how they what's the word? How they co-op. What is the word I'm searching for? Current events and how they, I guess I'll say align then for the 40th time today. How they align with the occult, with the ruling class, with the New World Order. Coexist was the word I was searching for. Maybe, probably not. But yeah, be on the lookout for that. That should get filmed sometime in the next decade, hopefully. And once I start, that'll hopefully be coming out weekly. I keep saying hopefully as if it's up to anybody else but myself. No, it's all on me. I don't know. I'm doing other things as well, so this isn't necessarily my complete priority. I hate recording too. But yeah, hopefully that happens sometime. I got a couple documentaries coming out. Freemasonry in the Vatican. The Jesuit Order and the coronavirus should be a good one. So thank you.